This video is going to show you how to take your research note cards and turn those into a draft. Feel free to pause at any point, rewind if you need to. Use this as a tool to help you out. So at this point, you've done all of your note cards and you've got a bazillion of them, and you may have done an annotated bibliography depending on the assignments for your class period. At this point, I want you to think about the letters that were on your source cards, the numbers that were on your note cards, and ignore them. Those were only for grading purposes. You don't need to worry about them ever again. Your first job is to make sure that your note cards and your source cards all match. If you've made an annotated bibliography, you can start there. Otherwise, just use your source cards. Make sure that for every note card you have a matching source card. So, for example, let me move to my document camera. Okay, here's 4 source cards that I have. First one, the title is His Life, George Méliès, Wilkinson, Alyssa, Summerland, Joe, and George Méliès' grave. The example that I'm going to show you is a biography research paper, but this same strategy works for whatever kind of research paper you're doing. So I'm going to spread my note cards out where I can see them, or again, you can use your annotated bibliography, that's your choice. And I'm just going to go through my note cards and match them up. So this one's Wilkerson. This one goes with His Life, George Méliès. So in the corner, I use life, and of course that's in quotes because it's part of the title rather than a name. And here's another life. This one is Summerland. This is Summerland. Here's another Summerlad. This one down here is grave, so I'm going to put it into my grave. And again, this one, George Méliès' grave. I'm using grave as my word for on the note card, so it's easy to tell which one it is. Okay, so you're going to sort all of those to make sure they match. That's your first step. While you're double checking, also make sure you have the required types of sources. If you had to use a non-print source like a podcast or a video, if there were required sources to choose from, make sure you've got those. And then last, make sure that all of your note cards include the source in the top right corner. Now we're going to start sorting your note cards. You might have learned sometime in the past to make an outline to help you with a research paper. This is essentially the same thing. We just have physical cards so we can move them around more easily. And this is where my students always realize how much they like the note card system, because it's really easy to change the order of things. Okay, so again, at this point, we're not paying any attention to which source they came from or what number they are. What we're going to do is sort our cards by topic and then label each topic. So let me show you what that would look like. I'm going to start reading my note cards to remind myself of what they say. So this first one, Méliès sold his shares in the family shoe business and used the money to buy a theater, Robert Houdin. Okay, so that's about his early life and getting into the theater. Let's see, this one, Méliès died in 1938. This is again about his personal life. It's not early in his life, but I'm going to put that in that same category. This one, George Méliès learned to do magic tricks while learning English in London. That's a different topic. Méliès bought the theater Robert Houdin in 1888. And I'm going to sort all of my note cards. Okay, now I have all of my note cards separated into different categories, and I've labeled them just to help me out. So personal life and family, his career as a magician, his movie career, and his life post-World War I. One thing that may happen is you might realize that you have some cards that don't really fit anywhere. They might be good in your introduction as an interesting anecdote, or you might realize, hey, this doesn't really fit at all. The other thing that will happen is you might see, hey, I need to find a little bit more information about what happened in his life post-World War I, if I want to include that in my paper. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm going to color code them. So all of my cards about his personal life, up here in the corner, I've marked with a red, and just made a little red triangle. You can use a dot or whatever makes you happy. About his life post-World War II, these are orange. His movie career, I've done blue. Okay? And this helps me out later so that when I start sorting my cards, if I come back to it at some point, I can easily see where they go. My next job is within each category or each color code set, I'm going to sort them through in an order that makes sense. And again, this is where the note card system really helps you out because you can move them around more easily than if you had an outline or if you had your notes written on notebook paper or something like that. So I'm going to go through my note cards. And as I'm reading through them, I'm going to sort them. His parents were shoemakers. That's going to be early in his life. Him being buried, that's later in his life. Working in a shoe factory. He declared bankruptcy, that's personal life, but that's going to come in between working with his family and dying. He was awarded, when Méliès was awarded the Legion of Honor, he was provided with a rent-free apartment. That is probably going to go after the bankruptcy. And actually, I know that it does because I've read enough about his life. I know enough about him. Okay, so I'm going to start sorting my cards into an order that makes sense. Now that I've organized all of my note cards, I'm going to write my thesis statement. And since I've reread them all, I know what my categories are. I know what direction I want to go with my thesis. If your class was assigned a research question to answer as part of your project, make sure you write a thesis statement that answers that question. Make sure you've met the requirements. And then write it down. If we're doing this in class, I might have you write it on a large Post-it note. I might have you just type it on a sheet of paper, but write your thesis statement. Then your next step is to start writing your draft. You're probably going to type this and set up your paper as you would for the final draft, so you don't have to redo it. Double space it, do your headings correctly, insert the page numbers, all of those things. Okay? You're going to type your best first draft of the essay, including your works cited page, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Make sure you review the requirements for MLA, for the version that we're using that's posted on Canvas for you. And then you're going to take your notes and connect those into paragraphs to complete your full draft. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, and then we'll break it down and talk about each part. The sample paper and also the paper with notes are both posted for you on Canvas. So here's my sample paper. The last sentence is my thesis statement. Many of the special effects used in movies today were first developed by a Parisian stage magician turned filmmaker named Georges Méliès. Okay, so for my thesis, you know that I'm going to talk about the special effects in movies and how he developed those, and then his life as a stage magician. And because this is a biographical paper that I'm writing, I'm going to include information about his about his personal life. Okay, so let's take a look at my introduction. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, scientific discovery and exploration were expanding. People were learning more about every corner of the world, medicine, industry, and even flight. In all this change, sometimes the development of movies is overlooked. The changes in the world and in people's knowledge were also reflected by changes in film. Wilkerson. Many of the special effects used in movies today were first developed by a Parisian stage magician turned filmmaker named Georges Méliès. Okay. So most of this in this introduction paragraph is stuff that I came up with like you normally would for an introduction. I do have a piece of information that came from one of my sources, Wilkerson. So you see I have that cited here with an in-text citation. And I'm just going to skim through my paper. This first paragraph talks about him being born in France, and you can see where I have sources included. Here's Life, Summer Lad, another from Life, Summer Lad. So when you did your note cards, you've already written them in complete sentences. And so you can take those sentences and put them directly in your paper. Okay, so if I take a look at this example, Marie-Georges Jean Méliès was born in Paris, France in 1861 to parents who were shoemakers. Okay, that information I got from one of my sources, so I'm citing it. At an early age, Méliès learned the family business, but he was not very interested in it. Okay, so that sentence you'll notice isn't cited. That's something that I figured out and thought of on my own based on the reading that I've done about him. So anytime that I have something that is actually from my note cards, that needs to be cited. But to have a good paper that's interesting, that's going to develop that argument that was in my thesis statement, I've got to have stuff in there connecting it. Okay, so you'll see not every sentence includes a citation. Okay, and that is what you should find. You're going to take these sentences from your note cards, this research, and you're connecting them together. Here's another version of that same paper that I've annotated to help you out so you can refer back to it. And again, this will be posted on Canvas for you. So I've double underlined here my thesis statement, and I've labeled 1, 2, 3. These are the 3 things that I'm talking about. So the main idea is his early life in Paris, being a magician, and being a filmmaker. And you can see from that, in my thesis statement, I don't include his whole life. So when I was sorting my note cards, I had stuff about post-World War I, and that will be included in my paper, but not specifically in the thesis statement. And you might find, again, that there might be note cards that you won't use in your paper at all, and that is okay. Okay, I've also got my introduction with a hook, all stuff that we've been doing forever with our writing. As I scroll down on this, it again explains the in-text citation. So this one has an author. This one is an article with no author. So this life is what was in the top right corner on my note card. Okay, so the body of my paper is going to be the information from those note cards. Okay, and again, the body paragraphs will cite the information from the sources and include your own ideas. And now I skip down. This doesn't include the whole paper, although the other version does. Here's my conclusion. And a conclusion should wrap up the paper and give an idea. It's restating my thesis that I want to improve. Okay, and there's only one citation in here, so I've got that author's last name. But most of the conclusion is mine because it's the thing that I'm arguing, that I'm trying to prove. It's the last thing I'm leaving with my reader. So my conclusion says, Georges Méliès is one of the few people who truly deserve to be called a visionary. Based on his world and the changes in it, Georges Méliès influenced the film industry at the beginning of the 20th century. In the 21st century, filmmakers have perfected the special effects he pioneered: ships flying through space, explosion, actors filmed at different times appearing on the same screen, color movies and television, and dissolves from one scene to the next. Georges Méliès' contributions to science fiction, film production, and special effects cannot be underestimated. And if I go back up to my thesis statement, the thing I'm arguing here, many of the special effects used in movies today were first developed by Georges Méliès. And then my last paragraph, my conclusion, reiterates that same idea. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the works cited now. So if you did an annotated bibliography, you've already done most of the work for your works cited. So the first thing you want to do with that annotated bibliography in your Google Docs is make a copy of it. Make sure that you make a copy of it. Because what you're going to end up doing is then in the copy, you'll delete all your annotations, and then you're going to copy and paste that into your research paper document. Okay? So in MLA, we call this a works cited page because these are the pieces, the works, the texts that are actually cited within the paper. Okay, and so you can see these I've gotten from my source cards. I've got the hanging tab just like I did when I made my source card. They're alphabetized G, H, S, W by the author's last name or the first word that's there. Okay, and we've probably talked about all of this in class already. So this should be formatted exactly like your source cards. And for the names of websites and things like that, you can either italicize or underline. When you did your source cards, you would have underlined them because we can't really italicize by hand very well. So you can see here Vox, Independent, and so on. Those are underlined. But again, italics or underlining is fine for that. So as I sort through my note cards and I've put them in an order that makes sense, now it's a lot easier to actually type my paper because I've got all of the information there. So you've done a lot of work for this paper already, and if you've done your research, followed the instructions for the note cards, writing the paper should be the easiest part of this. So good luck and happy writing.